Welcome to the next stage of my struggle with building my small house. I'm Greg, and I've always dreamed of building a timber frame house. In 2023, I made the decision to start building, and in June 2024, I got the building permit. My goal is to fulfill this dream without taking out a loan and in the future, create a vegetable garden and try to live self-sufficiently. If you want to track my progress, subscribe if you are new here and give me a thumbs up. In today's episode, I'm excited to take you along on my journey as I build the foundation footings on top of my concrete slab. I'll walk you through the steps of adding a water barrier beneath the footings, setting up the formwork, assembling steel rebar beams, and finally pouring the concrete. Along the way, I'll be sharing some tips and tricks that might come in handy for your own projects, or you can just sit back, relax, and enjoy watching the process unfold. The concrete slab was covered with PVC for a week to prevent the water from evaporating too quickly. To be honest, I only watered it twice, and there were no cracks, which makes me really happy. Before laying down the membrane, I swept off the dust and concrete rubble. The cleaner the surface, the better the water barrier will stick. Earlier, I bought 4 rolls of foundation water barrier. It's specialized rubber and bituminous membrane. It is composed of a tough multi-layer high-strength polymer film that is coated with a layer of specially formulated rubberized asphalt adhesive. It is dedicated to foundation footings. I've seen many times on YouTube how people struggle with cutting this membrane using a regular knife. Well, there's actually a special hook-shaped knife for this. Check out how easily it cuts. I started by laying out the water barrier and cutting it into the right pieces. I didn't measure anything. It is 1 meter wide, my foundation footings are 60 centimeters, and the concrete sub-base is about 15 centimeters wider than the footings. Nothing could really go wrong here. At the joints, I overlapped about 20 centimeters, just by eye. The experts online recommend that amateurs like me, who are welding the membrane for the first time in their lives, should do it in short sections. That means placing a weight in the center, rolling towards the middle, and then going at it. So the first time I fired up the torch to weld, a bit stressed, wondering how it works. But my dad said, "Simple, you'll manage." We've got fire. Oops. In some places, the sub-base was damp, so before welding, I sometimes had to dry the surface with the burner. Honestly, in some spots, everything fused perfectly, but in other places, it didn't go so well. I comfort myself by thinking that this is about capillary moisture wicking, so the fusing shouldn't matter much. The most important thing is that the membrane doesn't shift. Let me know if I'm right because I don't have much experience. Maybe it's the moisture on the sub-base, or should I have primed it first? What I noticed is that you need to pay attention to how you roll the roll, because when you unroll it, it tends to curl. I was welding off camera and the most interesting thing happened right then. On a freshly heated section, I placed the torch's hose. The hose melted. And that was the end of welding for the day. It was Sunday, and despite the early hour, I had to call it a day. The next morning at 6 a.m., I was already standing outside the store to buy a new hose because time was tight, rain was forecasted for that day. By the skin of my teeth, I managed to heat the last section just before the rain came. When the rain let up, I started assembling the formwork for the foundation footings. On the edges of the sub-base, where the old formwork was still in place, I transferred the foundation footing measurements from the batter boards to the boards in the excavation, stretched a string, and aligned the formwork to it. I noticed a neat trick. You can screw a small wooden block to the formwork board at a 90-degree angle, creating a handy foot. You can then nail it to the sub-base with concrete nails or use a concrete anchor. The boards themselves were a bit warped. The concrete slab had some unevenness of about 3 to 5 millimeters in places, and on top of that I bought nails that were too short. So, a series of unfortunate events. At first, I wanted to see how it would go with just the nails and then decide what to do next. I hammered the nails into the wooden blocks and started setting things up. Will it work or not? Well, nothing to do but try it out and see. And more nails. I did the same all around, and by the end of the day, the outer edge of the foundation footing formwork was ready. A day before, this workbench wasn't here. I quickly assembled it in the morning so I could cut the steel rebars more easily and have a sensible workspace in general. For my project, the reinforcement will rest on something like a steel ladder. It seems a bit overkill to me, but since it's in the design and the construction supervisor wants it, I'll have to do it. To make cutting easier, I made a cutting jig from a few pieces of wood so I could cut the steel to the right length without having to measure each time. It went smoothly, but the metal cutting disc burned out quickly. Of course, I didn't have a tool to change the disc. I always unscrewed it by hand, but this time I couldn't. It felt like it was stuck. I tried again and again, but had to give up. I went to my neighbor and we got it sorted out. And then the steel rebars went straight into the trench. I knew I'd be tying the reinforcement myself, and moving the finished beams would be difficult, so I wanted to get everything ready right there in the excavation. Here I'm measuring and cutting something, but I can't remember why I needed such small pieces. A clean workspace is key. At first, I marked everything with yellow graphite, but that was a bad idea. It wasn't very visible on the rebars, and trying to line everything up perfectly was pointless too, as if 2 to 3 millimeters one way or another made any difference. Later, I stopped bothering with that. I have this cool white permanent marker, probably with oil-based paint, super visible and worked great. The pencil didn't. Quick cutting of the steel tying wire. When I ordered it, I thought, why do I need so much of this wire? It's going to be wasted. It turned out it was barely enough, and I only had 36 meters of beams to make. Quick material delivery to the worksite. I came up with the idea to sit on a movable platform and comfortably tie the reinforcement. In the meantime, the delivery of concrete blocks arrived. We managed to place almost all the pallets on the slab. The driveway worked perfectly. Despite the rain, the crane truck could drive in and unload everything up close. If you want to see how I made the driveway before construction, click the link that'll pop up here. You know, it was my first time doing this. Of course, I had watched how others do it on stands in a prepared workspace. That wasn't an option for me. The leftover concrete from the sub-base that I left in the trench came in handy. It was right there, so I used it to make spaces for the reinforcement. And here we go. My uneven battle with the steel rebars begins. I sat, thinking and wondering how to tie it all together. I won't lie. The beginnings were tough. I tried many ways to find the right one that would work for me. From the very start of the build, I knew that steel rebars and masonry wouldn't be something I'd enjoy. And I was right. The beginnings were extremely difficult for me, but that's how it is with every new thing. You just have to learn. There was more thinking and figuring out than actual work. When I managed to finish the first steel ladder, it started raining again.
And it's raining again. Perfect.
The sun came out and I continued my battle. I tried to make the work easier for myself by slightly raising everything. That was the moment when my back was really giving me trouble. It was also when I realized that my steel rebar links weren't squares but rectangles, so I had to adjust all of them properly.
Both of my cards, 128 gigs, are full from my camera. My mobile storage is full, my laptop storage is full. I think I will not track the progress in so detailed way until I publish something that's slowly progressing with steel rebars, and footings will be done.
The next day I was exhausted. After 3 days of work, I'd had enough. My back was sore from the awkward position. My hands were covered in blisters. It was tough.
It's 9 a.m., middle of the week. I'm after 4 days of working and I haven't started yet, but I'm exhausted. My body hurts. I couldn't have a breakfast today. I was not hungry at all. I already gave up with my plans of adding another layer of concrete for foundation footings. I will try to do as much as I can, but I feel really terrible. Low energy, no motivation, really tired. Yeah. Not everything goes as expected.
I had a few days off and I was hoping to finish the reinforcement formwork and wrap up the week with the foundation footings poured with concrete. But I already knew that plan wasn't going to work. I had no energy left and I lost my motivation. I had to force myself to get back to work. I started by solving the problem of the uncomfortable position for tying rebars with steel stirrup. I put together a simple frame and it was a game changer, making the work much easier. I laid out the steel links, aligning them with the marks I made, right here. I checked if each stirrup was properly aligned. The difference in the blueprint was 2 centimeters between the longer and shorter sides, but in practice, sometimes it was only 1 centimeter. I had ordered the stirrups pre-made. Some were accurate, others not so much. I have to say, I was slowly getting the hang of it. With each knot, I was getting better and better. In the end, I unexpectedly realized that it's not the worst job. It's simple and repetitive. You could even say it's like meditation. There's this kind of meditation called mindfulness meditation, and this felt just like that.
Today I'm having some extra help.
To boost morale on Sunday, I brought along a companion. The reinforcement is done, now it's time to close the formwork. Here I'm placing PVC pipes. Why? Imagine that the foundation footings are ready and the entire structure with the concrete slab creates a perfect swimming pool. These pipes are meant to drain water from inside the foundation into the excavation. What do you think will this trick work? And in the process, they will additionally stiffen the whole formwork. In the spots where the pipes go, I drilled holes on both sides, added a threaded rod, washers, nuts, and it's ready. And this is how the reinforcement looks in the formwork, with the pipes.
Lumber delivery.
After quick calculation and realized I was short on boards, I had to swing by the sawmill in the morning before work to buy what I was missing. It wasn't much, just 6 5-meter boards, but how was I going to fit them into my trusty old Ford Mondeo? At the sawmill, I asked for some electricity and I cut what I needed on site to size. The long pieces were cut into sections that would fit in the car. A quick unloading and finishing of the formwork. Not everything was finished that day, obviously, since I had to go to work, and the concrete was already ordered. I had just one day left to finish everything. I promised my son we'd go see the new Deadpool movie, so to keep my word, I woke up at 5 a.m., rushed to the construction site for the final touches, and by 8 a.m. everything was ready for the next day's concrete pour. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the concrete truck. Before we started pouring, the site engineer came to check the steel rebars and everything was perfect. Having learned from the previous experience, I already knew where and how much concrete to pour, and I have to say, it went very smoothly. I poured the excess into the pre-prepared footings for the columns and the chimney foundation. The whole process took maybe 30 minutes. I spread the excess concrete with a board and then smoothed everything out with a styrofoam trowel. Before the concrete dried, I cleaned up whatever spilled onto the slab and formwork. I think it turned out great. I was really happy with it. Oh, and I didn't vibrate the concrete, I just tapped the formwork with a hammer. I did enough work myself. A few days later I hired some cheap labor.
Today I've hired some contractors.
After 30 minutes, the crew gave up. More interested in candies, I don't know if I will be hiring them again. Thank you for watching my construction adventures. More stages are ahead, so don't miss the next videos where I'll be showing how I move forward with the first walls. Take care, and see you in the next episode.